Alright, here we are with the Monster Crown playtest demo. I will be playing myself against myself, or I guess against my Diet Coke. So anyway, I've added just the bare bones stats to all the new monsters and some new text and stuff for the purpose of this, and testing some new mechanics. Alright, so you start off with your starter monster. Here we have player and Darwall, which that will later have a player name and all that good stuff. Alright, so the first thing you're going to do on your turn is draw a card, and I draw Vernia, and we'll get to what that is in just a second. Just know it's an NPC card. The second action that you do on your turn is play a location card. Your location deck consists of 15 cards that are all just based on locations that move the game along and determine like what monsters you can play and everything. So we get Flatlands monsters. So there are two fundamental types of each of the basic location types. There are location monster cards and location event cards. So the Flatland monsters lets me look at the top 5 cards of my deck, and then I can pick one monster that belongs to that habitat, and I can play it into my wild, functionally just giving me a free monster. So I'll play Drangus up into the top, and then I put the rest of the cards on the bottom of my deck in any order. Alright, so Drangus is over here in my wild, which is just this area just off center of the board where all of the monsters you haven't captured yet go. Alright, so during my turn, I've already done all the fundamental things. Now I can play up to 2 monsters, or a monster and NPC, 2 NPCs, whatever, into my wild and interact with them accordingly. So because I have a Flatlands out, I'm going to play Rodask, who, as you can see here, requires Flatlands. Throw that out into my wild. And I'll also go ahead and play Vernia. Alright, and like I said, normally you can only do 2 per turn, but that location card gave me the bonus Drangus. How nice of it. Alright, so the fundamentals of what you're going to be doing on your turn, you're going to be using the monsters on your team to interact with things in the wild. So, because Darwall, as you can see here, stats, attack 2, defense 4, speed 2, pretty decent stats, stronger than Rodask. So I'm going to use my Darwall and interact with the Rodask. It will attack me first because it has a speed of 3, dealing 2 damage to my defense stat, which will probably actually just be changed to HP. So Darwall has 2 remaining. Darwall goes to do its counterattack. 2 attack, 1 defense, boom, Rodask is beaten. Rodask is then added to my team, and my beastly, consort of creatures increases. So that's just the basic interactions and things you're going to be doing on your turn. That and encountering NPC cards, which I guess we can go ahead and do. Actually, I'll go ahead and capture this Drangus too. Alright, so I've done that on my turn. The next thing I want to do is I want to capture this Drangus. And Drangus is, a classic, one of my favorite Monster Crown monsters personally. So I'm going to encounter it in my wild. The first monster I'm going to use is my Rodask, simply because Drangus is pretty strong and I don't want my opponent to do anything to potentially beat my Darwall. So I'll lead with Rodask. He attacks, has the 2 attack. Drangus has immovable though, which reduces any damage it takes by 1, so Drangus only takes 1 damage and counterattacks and beats my Rodask. Rodask and any defeated monster is flipped upside down until events happen that cause them to go unbeaten. So then next, in comes Darwall, speed of 2, speed of 2, so they're going to tie up and hit each other simultaneously. However, he only does 2, and all damage resets in between different fights, unless it's a series of fights where there would be multiple monsters all at once. Everything just heals up in between battles. So, my Darwall also beats the Drangus. And actually, my apologies, there's also a stat modifier there, because I am Will type, he's Brute type, which will add in Type Wheel into effect, which makes me do 1 more damage, him deal 1 less damage. That part's a little more tentative now that I have added more stats. It used to just be a flat power bonus due to there only being the singular power stat. Alright, so I now have an impressive group of monsters. So let's go on to the next things that can happen. I'm going to go ahead and heal up my party, even though I wouldn't technically be able to yet. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to want to do on my next turn, we draw and do all of our things again. We'll just ignore some of these effects, but just know I'm building up my location cards and everything, building up a hand. So the next thing that's going to happen is I want to interact with my NPC card. So when I go to interact with my NPC, it's not like fighting a monster, and none of your monster stats come into play or anything. However, you still have to have a lead monster, so whoever's on the top, just in case your opponent does something that would instigate a battle. So Darwal's in the front, just in case anything happens. Alright, so I encounter Vernia. So Vernia, whenever you encounter her, you can do a couple different things. And NPCs just hang out in the wild, just like a monster would, between each turn until they're interacted with. So I can search for an atomic clock, then shuffle this card on my deck, or play a Migma from your hand, deck, or discard. So going into the discussions we had earlier, NPCs kind of, in a very simple fashion, unlock gateways to do various things. It's just like any kind of special summoning condition from anything like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or some things from Magic. Jin can't be played through standard methods. You need the atomic clock. The chief monsters like Migma and those can't be played without the NPCs in the same fashion. Alright, so I'm going to encounter her, and I'm going to activate the search for an atomic clock, then shuffle this into my deck. Alright, so blah blah blah, I search for the atomic clock. Oh, I already had it in my hand, what do you know? Alright, so, atomic clock. You may play Jin from your hand, deck, or discard. I will do that. Alright, so I had a Jin hanging out. Where'd it go? Aha. Alright, I play Jin. So Jin, much more beastly stats than the other things that we've seen. 4 attack, 4 defense, 3 speed. It has the boss effect, which is an ability that all the boss monsters have, which makes them just a little bit stronger in the wild, which increases their, they're more difficult to catch, but typically more powerful. Jin has higher stats than other monsters simply because of its difficulty to obtain. It also has the ability Aerial and Debilitate, both of which are presently a little tentative just based on the new stats and some new abilities, but I think that they will work very well. Aerial gives aerial monsters priority in speed over non-aerial monsters, and Debilitate lets them target any stat instead of just the defense stat to beat down. So, I'm definitely going to want to counter Jin, or encounter Jin, because, well, he's the boy, and I want to get him. So, what's going to happen next? I'm going to pick one of my monsters to lead with. I'm going to lead with good old Drangus, because, Drangus is the shit. And I say, alright, I intend to attack Jin with Drangus. Then my opponent decides to do some shicey shit, and says, nah, Trove, bitch. And that's the only way that you're actually allowed to play Trove. You must say, Trove, bitch. Trove is a rather beastly boss monster. So Trove gets played from your hand, and whenever your opponent is trying to interact with or encounter a wild monster, Trove pops out of the ground and becomes the new target for that, and it's a pretty dicey gamble for both players. There's a good chance that my team could get wiped. There's a chance that it might beat a few of my monsters, but I still captured the Trove in the end. I didn't do any of the calculations on this, so we'll see how it goes. Alright, so still leading with my Drangus because, well, he was the monster that was already out. So, and Trove has the +1 to defense from the boss boost as well. Alright, so he has a higher speed, and he just beats the hell out of Drangus. Drangus does nothing against that. Next goes Rodask. Rodask also does nothing against Trove. I might have to make Trove slower. You see how playtesting is beneficial? Yeah, so big picture, Trove just absolutely just mollywomps my whole team. It's not even a competition. So what happens if your team gets beaten? The instances where this would happen is mishaps against wild monsters or fighting your opponent, which we'll get to next. Alright, so Trove beat my team. So first of all, whenever wild monsters are interacted with but not captured, they just go to the owner's discard afterward. You know, you just kind of encountered it and it went on its merry way, just kind of licking on player bones afterward. So the things that that cost me, one, it cost me my hand. I have to discard my hand, and then I get to draw 5 new cards, which can be very beneficial. And it also makes it to where there's some danger to losing things. And I am creating a bank system, essentially, to where that's not always, just like in Monster Crown, nobody wants to lose their stuff all the time. So if you don't remember to bank, well, you might lose everything. But it's we'll get into the specifics of that later. But it's going to be a fun mechanic. So that asshole, he done beat my team. All right, so I discard my hand, draw 5 new cards. Next, I lose a location card. It goes to the bottom of my location deck. And that matters simply for a couple things. One, I can only play monsters in the wild that I have the applicable locations of. So losing locations is losing a pretty viable resource. However, they're not gone forever. They're just on the bottom of the deck. The final climax of the game happens whenever there are 15 total location cards between both players. Then the next fight that those players have is the climactic battle that decides the winner. So all of these things can be used to slow down your opponent and give you the advantage in the late game. So, but then afterwards, I'm scurrying back to town, which is why I lose the location, blacking out. So I lose a location, I lose my hand, but then, well, I heal up with a Kiri back in town, all my monsters are ready to go again, and I'm ready to take the fight to someone else. Alright, so, let's go ahead and show another form of interaction between both players. Alright, so let's say my opponent also has a Flatlands, if I can find a flat. There we go. Alright, so, as you saw earlier, all the locations are just kind of sitting here in a little stack next to your other cards. So the purpose of those, other than dictating what you can and cannot play, is that if the top card in both players' location stack or adventure stack is the same, then you can use one of your wild interactions for the turn to fight your opponent. So, right now, I have a Flatlands, they have a Flatlands. One of my encounters, I'm going to utilize it to fight my opponent because, well, he beat my ass with a Trove. I want to get him back. So, I'm going to instigate with my opponent. Since I am the attacker, I'm going to lead with Drangus, and then they get to pick in kind what they want to lead with. So, obviously, they just have 2 unstable monsters, not a whole lot to go for them. So this is not looking good, no type bonuses or anything. Alright, so they lead with Gorgem, who has 2 attack, 4 defense, 1 speed. So, Drangus goes first, deals its 2, Gorgem goes down to 2, Gorgem retaliates, only does 1 because of Drangus is immovable, Drangus attacks again, Gorgem is beaten. Alright, so then out comes Ambigu. Now, Ambigu is a 2/3/3, so it does have a higher speed tier, which allows him to get the drop on Drangus, and it does KO my Drangus. Oh no. But that's fine. Ain't caring none. Next, I'll send out my Rodask, because, damn, that's a fast Rodask. So, they're going to hit each other simultaneously. While I will be beaten, I do get to leave a point of damage on the Ambigu, putting it down to 2. Send out my Darwall, who has an attack of 2, and he outspeeds me, so he hits me for 2. And normally, that could be fine. However, my opponent could play things that give himself attack bonuses, different things like that. But in this instance, I will then be able to retaliate for the other 2 of his HP, beat him, and then my opponent suffers the same things that I just went through. So, those are the basics of interaction between the 2 players, and then obviously, those are more of like the rival battles interactions you have amongst like you and the villain groups or whoever amongst like throughout the adventure in the game. Then at the end, once we both kind of come to the conclusion of our adventure or the culmination of everything we've been out to do, signified by the total 15 locations, then once there are 15 locations out, regardless of whatever the top location is, you can use one of your encounters to fight your opponent. So timing that up with being the one who can instigate that fight is exceptionally important. You want to have, so for instance, like right now, I beat my opponent, but I mean, my Darwall's the only thing that made it out of the, skirmish. If they were to do things on their next turn, because all of their stuff is going to be active, if they did things on their turn, to somehow get up to the 15, and we fought, they're going to have the numbers advantage on me. So, those are the fundamentals of the various interactions and general gameplay in Monster Crown. I know this one, obviously a little ghetto. It'd be nice to have somebody to play with to show this and to just really highlight some interactions. But I think this gives a good fundamental look of the way that the game plays. So, like I said, the basics, playing up locations and you're building up your stack. Once there's enough location cards, you and your opponent have a big climactic battle. In between that, you're capturing monsters in your wild. Your opponent can, there's some universal boost cards, like things that just give something like +2 attack. You can play that on one of your monsters, one of your, a wild monster that your opponent is fighting, anything like that, something that just turns the tables all of a sudden on your opponent in a fashion they were not expecting. And the game is riddled with those kinds of cards. And then you saw how Trove functions in that trap kind of capacity. There's all kinds of boss monsters that do similar things. Stagless is one that's just an absolute, a dick. Kohler does the same thing that Trove does, but with interacting with NPCs. And then you have Igron, who is the counter boss monster. Whenever opponent plays a boss, or whenever a player plays a boss monster, Igron is played. It can be played from your hand, attacking that monster. So there's a lot of interactions like that that can really build up on each other. And in all the playtests that I've had, there's been significant back and forth, and it can get really interesting. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and end this here. And if there's any questions that you have, I'll be very willing to answer them. And I'll do a cleaner version of this in the next few days or so. All right, thank you guys for watching, and let me know if you have any questions.